Had the opportunity, we were asked to send 2 kids to Malawi, and then because we thought that throughout the presbytery, which is Allegheny County alone, we would get hundreds of applications, and they told us don't open it up to everybody in the church, just ask 2 kids to go, and it devolved from there because people didn't really seem to apply to go on the Malawi trip. But the ones that did go became very close to each other in the course of their travels. And I think if you've traveled a lot, travel really changes you. You see how the world is, you see how different it is from the way you live, you see how many ways there are to live a life. And when you can travel at the young ages of 13 to, what's Coleman, 16? 16. That's a very impressionable thing. When I was Coleman's age, I had been in 4 states. But to have been now in Africa, that's something that will never leave these kids. And so thank you for supporting them. You did support them in this emotionally, financially, spiritually. You prayed for them. We're very grateful for that. You don't want to hear from me. Let's hear from them. And so we'll open with a brief prayer, and then I will turn it over to our Malawi team. Let's pray. God, we give you thanks for the journey that you set before us. We give you thanks for each other. We give you thanks for these ones who have made a trip across the world to see how other people live, to see how other people experience faith, to see how other people cope under difficult conditions. We ask that you would bless them, calm their nerves if they are nervous about speaking to this group, and all these things, let them be done to your glory. In Christ we pray. Amen. Okay.
Okay, great. Zikomo. Oh, that's thanks. Moni. We never did quite get good at Chichewa. Good morning, everyone. So we are actually going to start our presentation with a Malawi greeting. So I will start. My name's Michelle Snyder. I'm 43 years old, and the role that I play in my church is a variety of things, including teaching adult ed. But I am also Mayabusa, which means pastor's wife. And in Malawi, when I introduced myself as Mayabusa, I got cheers. People, nowhere in my whole world did people celebrate my existence like Malawians who learned I was Mayabusa. Okay?
Hi, I'm Chloe. I'm almost 15. I have no role in my church.
I disagree. You're a junior helper with Sunday school, and we couldn't do without you.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I'm Greta. I'm 13. I'm going into confirmation this year, so I might have a role soon.
So whenever we introduced ourselves, we had to stand up.
And then everyone clapped afterwards.
That's true.
The first time we did it, everybody was saying their role in the church, and I had no role in my church, so I had to make something up on the spot. So I said, my name's Coleman, I'm 16, and I'm a youth member of my church. So pretty much we were all youth members.
Yeah.
Just one question already.
Well, Kemp hasn't gone. Oh, okay.
I'm Kemp. I'm 14. I'm going into confirmation.
So what makes this introduction not truly Malawian is that in a truly Malawian context, every single one of you would also introduce yourself, say your age, and the role you played in your church. And you might think I'm exaggerating in a room this size. I am not. The first 40 minutes of any gathering is introductions and speeches. And at least 40 minutes, which means everything is at least 3 hours long, because then there are speeches at the end too. Yeah, Devin.
Is being a worshiper not a role in one's church?
People didn't describe themselves in that way. So in Malawi, we took their lead, and we didn't hear them say that, although we could have easily done that.
We were also surrounded by people that were high up in the church all the time.
That's true.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. We were followed around by dignitaries, and so we didn't meet a lot of normal Malawians in those ways. If you don't like the coffee, Neither do I. It's amazing what will grow on you when it's the only coffee to be had in a country. By the end of the trip, we were craving it and brought it home with us. But we know that it's pretty awful, so we won't be offended. So I'm going to just start us out and give you just a broad overview, and then the kids are going to do almost all of the talking. So this was our Malawian Youth Pilgrimage 2019, and Brian told you what that was. So I had a terrible time explaining what this trip was on the front end. When people said, what are you doing? We're not building houses, we're not making converts, we're not necessarily preaching, we're not leading anything. Why are we going? And they kept calling it a pilgrimage. We were in the country about 3 minutes when I understood what we were doing and what we meant when we said pilgrimage. Our leader, Dave Carver, quoted this from Pope Benedict a lot on our trip. Pope Benedict said, to go on a pilgrimage really means to step out of ourselves in order to encounter God where God has revealed God's self, where God's grace has shone with particular splendor and produced rich fruit of conversion and holiness among those who believe. The richness of our experience was single-handedly as a result of not making assumptions about what we were going to do, but simply knowing that if God was there, we were going to find God there and looking for places where that was. So that's what we did. The sort of nuts and bolts of our trip were that on July 2nd, we left the presbytery office at 4 o'clock, 3 or 4 o'clock for Washington, D.C. And July 4th at 3:45, we arrived at our destination. So we were on the road, quite literally, for 2 full days. We drove to Washington, D.C., we spent the night there. We had a 13-hour flight, 3 flights to get to our destination. So our longest flight was 16 hours. But you can see we start with smiles. There's Coleman, or Kevin Coleman crashed there. Oh, we can turn these lights out, actually, for the PowerPoint.
You want to grab
Can
the light
you
down
get the
there?
lights over there? It'll help them see you sleep. So there they are, totally crashed. Yeah, most miserable experiences in my life have been on airplanes for longer than 12 hours. We did 2 basic things on our trip. One of them was that we went around the country holding youth conferences. So we met with Malawian youth. It was organized by the Synod on their end and the Presbytery on ours to meet with Malawian youth, our youth and Malawian youth, to talk about what challenges we face in faith in the world that are similar. So how do we find our commonality and our common ground in those ways? We did it in 3 different places. We did it in Blantyre, which is where we flew into. We did it in Mangochi, which is where Lake Malawi is. It was about 3 hours north. And then we did it in Malonji, right? Is that? It was Mount Malonji.
Yeah.
In Malonji. Okay. We went to Malonji, which is about an hour and a half south of Blantyre. So we were like a traveling show. We went from village, or actually city to city, gathering youth in those regions to have this same youth conference. We got pretty good at it by the 3rd one because it's what we did. We did the same thing each time. The second thing we did that was very significant, so we did these youth conferences for the first half of our trip. The second half of our trip, we went and stayed with partner churches. Now remember, all 5 churches that went, so there are 5 churches that went, 4 of them had partner churches. We were the only ones that didn't. And so they arranged for us to stay at this church, which happened to be a place that Brian had visited a year before when he was there in Malawi. So while he was in Malawi, he visited this place and he said to Dave Carver, if our kids come back, I would like them to go to a place like this one. So that's where we went. I said that we stayed with a partner church in Mawila, or Mawila. I saw it spelled both ways.
No, it had like an R sometimes and an L sometimes.
It had an R sometimes and an L sometimes. So I spelled it both ways. Yeah. They don't care that much about those kind of things. So these were the youth that came to hang out with us on one of our days at our partner church. We lived in homes with Malawians. We ate with them and talked with them and rubbed shoulders with them. So that's the second thing we did. And this is Greta learning to cook their staple food, which is, what is it, guys?
Nsima.
Nsima. They can talk about that if we have time later. This is me preaching. I preached at their church on that Sunday. Kemp and Coleman are playing cards or watching them do card tricks. I'm not sure. So that was more time with the youth, and Chloe trying to carry a bucket of water on her head. Quite unsuccessfully, I assure you. So that is what we did. So what we wanted to do was talk with you now. The kids want to talk with you about what did they learn? What are the takeaways that they learned on this trip? So this is one of their first takeaways, and Chloe's going to take it now.
So,
Try and speak loudly. You don't want
yeah,
From the slide.
yeah.
It's fine.
So,
Other way.
yeah.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Right there.
Oh, sorry. So, when we were initially collecting medical supplies, I realized that cough drops were on the list of supplies that were requested, and that didn't sit well with me. Like, that kind of annoyed me. Why, after a major cyclone, would they be asking for cough drops when they could ask for so much more pertinent things, like tourniquets or oxygen masks, or I don't know, but why cough drops? Cough drops were so trivial, and that kind of translated into my idea that the people asking for supplies didn't really know what they needed or what they were doing. And I realize now that that's a really toxic ethos, but that was what I thought. And I found out later that the cough drops were being requested to prevent antibiotic overprescription, which in turn leads to superbugs, which is a very serious medical problem. And that experience led to the realization that people do know what they need, and it's not the job of the developed world to infringe itself upon the developing world, as we so often do. And that was a really good thing for me to realize.
Good job, honey. Nice job. All right. Okay. Oh, I covered that. Oh, no, I didn't. Okay, Greta.
Oh, okay.
That says that global economics are complex and there are no easy answers.
Hi. So, one of the places that we went in Malawi was a tea factory. Like, over here is just like the fields of tea. That's all tea. And this too. And those are some people who were working in the factory. They were just doing, like, scraping tea from a machine into a box for like hours on end. So, in the tea factory, the workers who were picking the tea leaves had to work in the hot sun all day long, and they had a basket on their back of tea leaves. They could only pick the tiniest tea leaves because the big ones don't have as much flavor or something. I don't know. But, and they just throw them in their baskets all day, and at the end of the day, the baskets were sorted, and people took out the stuff that like wasn't perfect. And then the baskets were weighed, and they were paid by weight. And I think the most you could make all day was $2. Yeah, and the tea factories were almost always run by foreign owners. So not many Malawians were running these factories. Chloe left the tea factory saying that she wanted to boycott tea that wasn't fair trade. Mom left saying she wanted to drink more tea to support the workers. And I just left confused.
Okay, Kemp?
Oh, alright, so things I learned in Malawi was friendship and yeah, mainly friendship is like a really big, like they really like to become friends with like everybody. And like as soon as like we would drive up to like their church, they would greet us with like song and dance, and we would give handshakes to everybody, and they would want to talk to us, and they're just really like social, really friendly people, and I really like that.
texting. My speaker notes are on my phone. So
read what that says, because it's not very clear on the screen, or it's too small.
We are taken out of our comfort. When we are
Okay.
taken out of our comfort zone, we are capable of more than we have.
So, even before we left on the trip, at the orientation, we were constantly warned and told that we were going to be taken out of our comfort zone this whole trip, and we were going to be praying in public, speaking in public, doing things we would never do at home. Okay, sorry. But in terms of praying in public, we would mostly end up praying for the blessings of the meals and gatherings. So before breakfast, lunch, second lunch, because we often ate like 5 meals a day, we would pray at least once before and at least once after, thanking God for the meal. And that towards the beginning, it was more of them praying, kind of like leading us in, because they knew we weren't comfortable. But we ended up praying a lot for the meals, and I know personally I got pretty good at it. I know you guys got good at it too. And that's one of the greatest things I think we've taken away from this trip is public speaking. Other than meals, group meetings, so for the youth conferences, we would pray so many times, probably 4 times per conference. And they would just call on people randomly. Sometimes it would be adults, most of the time it would be kids. And opening for nearly everything. So as Mrs. Snyder said earlier, we had a 4-hour closing ceremony dinner that was supposed to be just our families, our 2 host families, but they ended up inviting half the church too. So,
And they announced in front of the entire church who was invited and who wasn't.
That's friendship piece.
That's right.
but we sat down and we were planning on just, having a meal, but it ended up being about an hour of introductions and then speeches and then gift giving. And that's another thing. Gift giving is very ceremonial, where you have to give a speech receiving a gift, and you have to give a speech giving a gift. So lots of formalities in their culture. And then also...
Are you done with that luncheon, that dinner closing ceremony?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was sitting beside Coleman, and they were coming around to us, and I actually, about 3 people away from him, leaned over and said, "Would you be willing to give a speech on behalf of our team?" And he did. He did.
That happened a lot. We didn't get much notice in advance of who we were going to be speaking. Kind of like, here, I'll talk about in this picture. So, I ended up going on TV, not intentionally at all. I think the first day we got there, we got off the plane and went to our hotel, and 2 people from a radio station came up to some of the people traveling with us and interviewed them. And I think it's connected. I think it was the same broadcasting company. No? Somebody.
This was secular.
Oh, it was?
Honey,
And so they came up to us and talked to Pastor Dave, who was the leader, and said, "We want you guys to come on TV with us and do an interview." So none of us had any idea, including Pastor Dave, what was going on. So he just said, "Everybody prepare a piece in case you're going on. It's probably going to be a group interview where they ask everybody a question." And we got to the TV station and they said, "Okay, we want 1 youth from Pittsburgh, 1 youth from Malawi, and a pastor to come on TV." So they ended up asking me to go on TV, and I think it went pretty well. But
You were up there for like a solid 25 minutes
Yeah,
just
yeah.
talking.
it didn't feel like it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So I will just brag a little bit on Coleman. Like, he was on TV because he was our resident spokesperson. Coleman ended up doing most of the speeches. By the end, he was sort of our spokesperson for the team. Yeah, he's proud of that. Because actually, I'll tell you the truth, when we went on our Malawi retreat at Crestfield, I don't know, in March, I had these 4 in the car, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to talk the whole way to Slippery Rock. Because not one of these kids talk. Maybe Greta does, but but otherwise, they have ended up actually proving me very wrong. So that's great. Greta, you read what that says because it's small.
Global challenges with age, gender, power, and privilege. So, This right here next to me is the girl at the house that we stayed at. I couldn't pronounce her name, so I don't know. But she would, like, every time I saw her, she was outside on this mat by this, what kind of stove? Charcoal stove. And with all those laundries hanging around. And she was always, like, at home either cooking or cleaning, one of the two. And, like,
and she was the daughter in the family.
She was their daughter, and she had a degree in journalism. And she was 23 years old. And she stayed at home cooking and cleaning for her family. Yeah. And then the youth conferences that I think Kemp was talking about were like, we'd get together with youth and we'd discuss challenges that youth in America and youth in Malawi face in the church. And like, I realized like more and more towards the last one, they were practically protests against age discrimination in the church. Like, in the last one we went to, kids were like shouting. Like, that's, you didn't talk about Isaiah. There was a kid that we met named Isaiah, and he like stayed with us for the rest of the trip. He was in one of the pictures on Kemp's slide. And he like was mad. He was really mad because his dad was the pastor. And like, there was still like age discrimination with him. And whenever the kids would make points as to why this was unfair or unjust, like the pastors would basically shame them and like tell them that they'd like ask them questions about how they were feeling and then say their feelings were wrong. So, yeah.
There's a lot of respect given to age and men, and so older men are their voices matter, and the youth. And for them, youth. What was youth? 35. They called anybody that was youth 35. So sometimes in the youth group, parents and children would be in the youth group together. It was very strange. But if you're under 35 in the church, you really don't have a role. You're not allowed in leadership. You're not really given much voice. Yeah.
I was just wondering if you could clarify like what you meant by age discrimination.
Yeah.
Was it towards older people, or was it was towards younger people?
Yeah. Yeah, like the youth would say, services are too long and we would like to have shorter worship services. And they would, they'd say, tell us how you feel about the worship services. And the kids would say, we hate them, they're too long. And the adults would say, well, that's like faithlessness and like you should like be more faithful and that kind of thing. But the gender stuff was pretty hard. Chloe?
So I think it would be appropriate to preface this part by saying that I'm a democratic socialist. I do mean that legitimately. I'm a diehard socialist, and I support Occupy Wall Street and Bernie Sanders very strongly, not to make a political endorsement. I do support these things very strongly, and that's why this next part was so difficult for me, because while in Malawi, I realized by like driving through villages and seeing their incredibly small little mud huts and visiting the house of the CEO of one of the top oil companies in the country and seeing how modest it was, how it was just like kind of a Mount Lebanon house, and he was the richest person in the country. Witnessing that kind of thing made me realize that American suburbia, the Mount Lebanon, is like, it is the global oligarchy, is the global 1%. And as a person who is fervently anti-1%, it was really difficult to realize that we're the 1% of the world.
Coleman? Or Kemp? Sorry, Kemp, this is you.
All right.
Read the bottom.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right, so one of the main things that I think all of us learned on the trip was that church means a lot more to them than it does to us. I feel like because they're, well, they have longer, like much longer services, and like they have a lot more like choir and they just have a lot of, well, there's like pros and cons of things to both, but their church services, they would last really long, and there were maybe 500 people in each service.
Wow. Most places had 3 services.
Yeah, like there was like an English Chichewa, and then
Contemporary, maybe?
Contemporary in Chichewa.
Yeah. And their worship services started at 6 a.m.
Oh.
So the one I preached at, we were there at 6.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we had to stay at each service, I think, like all 3, so it was like 6 hours. Non-stop. Yeah, but I think, I mean, I wouldn't say that I disliked it. I feel like it was fun. I mean, each service, because of all of like the choirs, it felt shorter than these services.
Can I ask a question, Kevin? Do you feel like the kids there are more serious about their faith?
Yes, definitely.
Can you point to any evidence? I had heard that they were surprised that our kids don't try to like get their friends to come to church.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's like our kids just don't do that. You know, they're like, I go to church, I'm not gonna ask my friends to go to church.
Yeah, like the youth there, they were very, very like religious, and they were very serious about their church. And they would try and do anything for their church that they could. I mean, it's kind of hard to explain. But
It's good.
I was in a group at the youth conference. I was in a group at the at one of the youth conferences where we were explaining the struggles between churches with youth, the struggles with youth in churches in Malawi and America. And I said, like, kids aren't coming to church anymore, like they show no interest, and they like all gasped. And then like you could hear a pin drop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Are there different?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Different churches? I mean, these were Presbyterian,
These were Presbyterian.
but are there other denominations?
The main
within
denomination is Catholic
Oh,
throughout
okay.
the country.
And then the
And then a
Presbyterian
Muslim.
denomination that we were affiliated with was the 2nd largest in the country. So
They're
there,
also very big enrollment.
yeah, there are other independent churches, I'm sure, but we didn't have a lot of exposure to them.
Are they as involved as the Presbyterian?
Who?
The other churches. The other churches.
I don't know. We didn't have much dealings.
So the kids who don't go to church, is that because they're Muslim or animist, or they just don't go, or what?
I don't know. We did see a lot of mosques. I would
Okay.
guess that there's a significant Muslim minority. Yeah, but and they coexist pretty well. But they don't coexist in a way that we coexist here, where we might be a little more sort of, how would you talk about that? Like interfaith dialogue and understanding, you know, the value in multiple religions. They really do want to evangelize their Muslim neighbors, but they know that's dangerous, and so they walk that tension. Yeah.
Do any of you guys have a thought as to why the kids were so much more interested in going to church and bringing their friends versus Americans?
I'll take this one. I think that, I mean, I don't know the answer because we were only there for 2 weeks. But I think the reason they were so tied in with their church is because their parents took them to church at such a young age. And church is such a big part of their society there, where it's not here anymore.
So it's kind of cultural partly.
Right. Like you just asked, you know, why don't kids go to church, or why are there kids that don't go to church? But I really don't think there are many that don't go. I think almost, almost every family goes to whatever denomination they are. Like, it is a huge part of their culture.
Yeah. Chloe, were you going to answer that? Did you have a thought?
No.
Okay. I mean, I would say that there's a correlation probably between poverty and religion. That there's, you know, when you've got to depend on God for sustenance, like there's a deeper kind of faith connection. I think it's one of the dynamics of secularism that we've moved away from religious dependence. Peter?
I was just wondering if the kids all do go to church, who are they inviting? Like, are they inviting their Catholic friends to go?
I think I hear more of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Their Catholic friends or their Muslim friends. Or I don't know that they're inviting friends. I think they feel guilty about the fact that they're not inviting friends. And it might be that there really aren't a lot of people to invite, but it's just so enculturated to them. We need to be evangelizing. We need to be evangelizing. And so they say, how do you guys evangelize? And these folks say, what? So, yeah.
Is it possible that young people there have fewer things pulling at them?
I think that's
how
right.
many people have televisions and various things that take their attention and organized sports and what have you? Are there so many things pulling for their attention and loyalty, or is this where you go for sustenance, for friendship, for socialization?
What I say is the Malawian church is the American church of the 50s. I mean, so however you think about that, that's how I think about them.
What did you say again?
That the Malawian church today is like the American church of the 50s.
Yeah, I was going to say that myself. I
Yeah.
agree with that.
Yeah.
Church is not just every Sunday.
But we didn't have handheld devices that distracted us or any of those kinds of things.
Right, right. Yeah. Coleman.
Okay. So after having spent 2 weeks in a completely different country, not knowing anybody, by the end we absolutely felt at home and we had a second family. And to be able to go on this trip there's nothing like it, and this hit us at exactly the right time in our lives, I think, for us to see all this. And for an American to go to Malawi is nothing compared for a Malawian to be able to come to America. And I think we absolutely, as a group and as a church, owe it to them, and just as Christians in general, owe it to them to have them come over to America to see our perspective on faith. And to think we can do this it's not ridiculous, because we can raise enough money for them to come over. They can raise enough money for us to come over there. I mean, we both pitched in. We were able to raise enough to send ourselves over there. I absolutely think that it's our duty to take them over here. None of them, I think there was one person in the entire group over there that had been to the United States, and that was the daughter of the CEO of Puma Oil. And she was 8.
Talk about this picture, what you're doing there.
Oh, so at our farewell dinner, our church had raised some money and the presbytery had raised some money, and we decided as a group we'd like to give our money to them in hopes of sending at least one kid over, or at least starting something within the presbytery over there to try and send some kids over here. So I really think personally, as a church, we should be all ears and completely welcome to taking some of them over here and showing them the United States and changing their perspective on faith.
So what you might not know is that when we collected medical supplies, some people just gave cash. Do you remember what that total was?
It was in the 400s.
Okay.
Is that right?
I want to say it's closer to 6. Or Teresa might know. Anyway, we also collected $500 or $600, and we had some debate as a team about what we should do with that money, because it was raised for us to use for them. So we thought about buying diabetes kits, and I think we thought about a lot of things. And Dave Carver, once again, he's the partnership guy. He's been to Malawi 23 times, I think. And he was the one that said to Chloe, if they say they need cough drops, they need cough drops. We trust our partners, before we knew what those cough drops were. So Dave said, better for us to take hard currency into the country, ask them what they need, and buy it there, or give them the money so that it feeds their economy as well. So that's what we did. And what our group, so all 5 churches raised similar amounts of money. I think we ended up with about $2,000 at the end. And so the team the team of kids decided what they wanted to do with that money was give it for this purpose. So there's Coleman, again, making a speech and giving a gift in a public place to ask them if they would send a Malawian youth our way. Yeah. Yeah, so each of the kids are able or ready, I don't know if they're able, but they're supposed to be able, to say how they plan to or will live differently as a result of this experience. So, Kemp, you can.
I think it was very overwhelming to me to go over there and get all the information I did just in 2 weeks. I don't really know how right now, but I feel like it's just gonna come to me over time.
So, since leaving Malawi, as I already kind of said, I've kind of gained a new perspective of the developing world and, the developing world. And I've come to believe that the traditions of the developing world have a right to existence, and we're in no place to attempt to infringe our values regarding gender roles or education or any of that upon different cultures, and that doing so is neocolonialism, essentially.
So I agree with Chloe, but I also agree with Kemp a little bit. I feel like I learned a lot, but I don't know right now how that's going to play into my life later. And I think that's something I'm going to learn over a matter of time, maybe even being years or a lifetime. So that's where I'm at right now.
There's no one thing I took away from the trip, but if I had to pick one, there's something that the entire West can take from Malawian hospitality and just developing world hospitality as a whole. Never in my life have I met someone so happy to see me that I've never seen before until I went to Malawi. And like the examples I can give are just endless. The host at our hotel, Christina, I think, she was incredible. And our hosts for our host families in Moia for the 3 days, I woke up at like 5 a.m. Me and Kemp woke up at 5 a.m. every morning to the sound of them sweeping the hallways and boiling water so we could take showers. It was just ridiculous, and we had meals provided for us.
How many baths a day did you take?
More than we wanted. That's another reason why I think partnership is so important at this point, because they've given so much to us, and as of right now, we haven't given that much to them, and it's our duty to return the favor to them, in my opinion, and in the team's opinion.
So what that was is that we would wake up and somebody had been up since 3:30 or 4 probably, collecting water and heating that water for us to get a bath, which we had just had at 6 o'clock the night before. But you don't tell people, no, I don't want a bath if they've done all that to get you one. So we were cleaner than we've ever been. Yeah. So we have some next steps that we want to talk about, and also some requests that we want to make from you. Greta, you can talk about the first one.
Oh, yeah, sure. We'll be working with the Fair Trade Group to expand the use and visibility of a fair trade coffee and tea that I think is right out in the hallway.
Say about the conversation that you had last week.
I had a conversation last week.
Oh, you didn't have it?
No.
Okay, Chloe, go ahead. Chloe, go ahead.
We're gonna have it today.
Yeah.
Mrs. Boisvert has requested that we partner with the Fair Trade Partner Initiative. Yes, to kind of advertise that and increase visibility of that.
Among other things that we don't know yet.
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
Okay, great. Coleman?
Am I doing the third one?
No, second.
Second one.
Second one?
Sister church.
We would like to become a sister church with Maria CCAP. So I've already talked about this a ton, but seriously, it is my #1 priority as a member of this church to get some of them over to the United States. Because that would be absolute, as much as it was life-changing for us, it would be life-altering for them. They would never come back the same.
So what's involved with being a sister church?
Brian?
So money is one of the things that is not very involved. You're not allowed to give more than $2,000 to your partner church as a gift per year. It's
And you don't have to give that.
And you don't have to give anything. It's mostly cultivating relationships with people in that congregation. The presbytery hosts trips between the two countries every other year. Every year there's a trip. One year we go there, the other year they come here. And we would work to get people from our sister church to come here. And then they would join us in worship. They might speak in our worship service. We might stay in somebody's home, talk to us about faith and life in Malawi. It's not an expensive thing, except insofar as we'd be raising money to travel, have people travel back and forth. And then of course, members of this church would go to Malawi and represent us there and possibly speak in churches there, because they don't care if you're clergy or not. They're going to put you in the pulpit. Michelle's a great preacher, she really is, but she's not clergy, and they put her in the pulpit. And so it would be just like the pilgrimage, it would be to build relationship and understanding. Yeah.
Are there any limitations on their end, who is chosen to go when you're talking about youth discrimination?
Yeah,
and gender.
we've talked to the man who kind of is in charge of the partnership at that end. We very much trust. He's a layman. He's not a minister, and he understands our insistence that people who don't have the means also be included. People who aren't higher ups in the church be included. It's hard though, because it is a partnership, and we have to trust our partner to be ethical with us. And so we don't know how they choose, really.
And we have heard that it's harder to get visas for young single people than it is to get visas for older, grounded, rooted people in the community. And so that was one of the, they kind of said, we'll take your money, we'll do our best, we'll keep working on it, but they have had some challenges with getting people visas. We go over there and we arrive at the airport to apply for a visa, because we're that certain that that's a rubber stamp. For them, I think last year they had 4 people turned down for a visa. So it's tough. Yeah.
Is that the Americans turning them down?
Yeah.
It's the American Embassy in Malawi.
Yeah. The third request, and probably we each spoke about our passions, and this is mine. But we would all agree, right, Kemp? We agree. Whatever you say. We would like to see the church commit to a systematic way of making opportunities for life-changing pilgrimages like this one available for all people. I have big ideas about this that I'm supposed to apparently talk to the mission committee about. But I think it's not lost on us that it was an initiative of this entire congregation to get us there. And it would be a dream of mine that no kid ever graduates from high school in this church without having had the opportunity to do what we did. That no adult is not given the opportunity to do this. It really does transform. I'm a presenter for a living. What I do is presentations, and I am also deeply convicted that presentations don't change lives. Experiences change people's lives. And so we would like to see this church engage in partnership. We would like to see this church commit to making these opportunities available for others, and we would like to see this church stretch our imaginative and creative muscles about how we can think about fair trade in a variety of ways that make people's lives better in other parts of the world. So, questions? Or the end, or whatever. This is actually a sunset that these guys saw on a boat on Lake Malawi.
That's amazing.
Yeah, okay, so we're willing to take questions. Yes?
I have a question for the kids. So what was the most similar thing? What was the thing that maybe connected you the most with the youth in Malawi?
I'll take that one. After the first youth conference we ever had, we had like a lunch type of thing, and people were just like scattered, mostly like Malawians with Malawians and Americans with Americans. And so my friend Annabelle and I from East Liberty, I think Coleman brought a deck of cards, and we just took the cards and we were like, you know what, let's just organize a game of spoons? It was spoons.
Yep.
And so it was just like maybe 10 or 12 of us sitting around in a circle playing spoons, and
you involved the Malawians in that?
yeah,
Okay.
it was mostly Malawians. Yeah. And so, yeah, they were really bad at it, but it was fun. We always won.
Other questions? Yeah, Nancy.
I guess, what did you find the Malawian youth were most curious about with regards to your lives? Like, were they curious about, you know, the pop culture or music, or was there anything that sort of stood out to you that they were most curious about finding out from you?
Well, I want to talk about this one guy. His name is Isaiah, and he traveled around with us for the youth conferences. And he absolutely loved American music, but they didn't have anything like Spotify or Apple Music. They had to buy every song they wanted to listen to. And once we went over there with all of our music on our phones, he wanted to listen to all of it.
Yeah, so we sat in the bedroom for like an hour just exchanging music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, he had me write him a list of book recommendations.
Yeah, the truth is everybody wants to get Isaiah here, right?
Yeah.
We're not just talking about
any Malawi.
We want Isaiah. Yeah, that's it.
Did you find, in terms of your actual beliefs in God, theological differences between the youth that you were visiting? Did that ever even come up, or did you notice it, or how did you deal with that?
Oh, okay. So I did notice that Malawian Presbyterians are a lot more like our evangelicals here. They're very theologically conservative, and they believe in literal devils and the afterlife and that kind of thing. And so yes, our theological beliefs differed greatly. But they seemed to kind of assume that we had the same beliefs, so it didn't really create any issues or divides. But yes, there.
So you didn't talk about differences?
We tried to hide them as much as possible.
Because that's partnership.
So as to not create rifts in our relationship unnecessarily.
Thank you.
Yeah, we were sort of instructed as we were going that like our job is not to go try to change someone else's culture, and so we all wore dresses the whole time because women wear dresses there. They wanted to talk a lot about drugs and alcohol among youth, 1950s America, right? And so we talked about drugs and alcohol. We heard not a mention, I don't think, of like LGBTQ issues at all, and wasn't even on their radar. So, yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Yeah, Bill.
What's the economic situation there? Is there a lot of poverty in the country? I mean, were these what we would call middle-class people which you were dealing? I mean, middle-class in their country, not in this country.
Yeah, so I'll answer that. The economic situation in that country is actually pretty fascinating. They're one of the poorest countries in the world, right?
Top 4.
Yeah, they're very, very poor countries. Chloe's right that the CEO of Puma lived in a house that was not bigger than ours, with a lifestyle that was pretty similar to ours. So they didn't allow us to see the deepest level of poverty. We wanted to live with like regular Malawians, and we all lived with the single wealthiest families in the churches. They just wouldn't let us. which was kind of disappointing to the kids actually, because they were interested in seeing what the real Malawians looked like. There was a bit of a veil there. But apparently in Malawi, as I understand, Brian could answer this question better probably, the president of Malawi studied at the University of Chicago. And he came back to Malawi terrified of slums. And so he did a lot to strengthen the tribal leadership in order to keep people in their villages, to keep the economies in the villages strong, so that people wouldn't move to cities. He said, if there are no cities, there will be no slums. And so what you have in Malawi is a kind of poverty that is a landed poverty, like that people have land, village, tribal kinds of poverty that are a little bit different than what you might see in Soweto or somewhere like that, where the poverty, sort of South African poverty wouldn't be as, the country isn't like sort of ranked as impoverished, but parts of the slums are way, way worse. In Malawi, you don't see that as much. Do you think that's a fair way to talk about the economics? Yeah, but I believe that the average Malawian lives on $2 a day, and I think that's up from, it's pretty recently up from $1 a day. So, and Dave Carver will tell you that the difference between $1 a day and $2 a day that he's witnessed over his lifetime is an extraordinary difference.
Yeah, $2 a day is the world definition of the threshold in poverty.
Yeah. So, so in true Malawian style, we would go another hour and a half, which we are not going to do. But we are, in true Malawian style, going to invite the Abusa to give a speech as the end of our presentation. Oh, we have sugarcane up here.
Don't swallow it. Don't swallow it.
So yeah, sugarcane in Africa, you just rip it up with your teeth and you chew on it. But this is cut up in small bite-sized. You can chew on it without hurting your teeth too badly.
You just have to have a spit cup.
And it's just like candy. They pure sugarcane. So if you want that, you're welcome to it.
Because Kemp may or may not have been jacked up on sugar a lot.
Well, thank you for being here. I want to say thank you for supporting this mission trip, this pilgrimage, because here you have 4 kids whose perspectives have been changed. And that's what church is about, changing the world through changing people and through changing their perspectives. And when you've been to Malawi and seen how they live, you're not going to volunteer to walk the border with a baseball bat. You know, you're not going to be a hateful person who looks at other people, unlike themselves, as less than yourself, if you've actually lived with other people and seen how much like you they are. And so we have invested in that mission here. And I look forward to seeing where it takes each of the 4 of them. But I also look forward to seeing where future trips, not necessarily to Malawi, future mission trips in this church can transform adults and children alike. When you get out into the world, you never quite come back. And so thank you for making it happen. That's my closing speech. I'm Brian Snyder. I've been the pastor here for 9 years. Yeah. Oh, Joanne.
In the late 80s, I think it was 1988, Jim and I and Llewellyn Maxwell were part of a group from Pittsburgh Presbytery that went to the Sind of the Southwest. And we were told there that we were seeing the third world, and that really changed us. We often refer to that trip in New Mexico and Arizona and meeting someone who had walked from Guatemala for his freedom and worshiping there, and the Hopis.
Yeah, so you can testify to the fact that it changes you.
Navajos, in our own country. And going out to East Liberty, many of us have been to East Liberty Family Health Care Center. And if you can't get overseas, there's things in our own backyard.
That's right. Well, thank you everyone. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Talk to the kids if you want to. They're here. And